After over 5 years of waiting, playwright and director Martin McDonagh finally released his new film, The Banshees of Inisherin, starring In Bruges duo Colin Farrell and Bredan Gleeson. And I gotta say, boy, what a movie. But from the start. The story takes place on the fictitious island of Inisherin, a lonesome piece of land on the west coast of Ireland, set in 1923 during the Irish Civil War. Here we meet Patrick, a happy and nice fella who is on his way to invite his best friend Colin to the pub since it's already 2 p.m. But as he reaches Colin's house, the door is locked and Colin does not answer, instead simply sitting there, smoking. As it turns out, Patrick's sister Siobhan is right when she says,
"Maybe he just doesn't like you no more."
McDonough immediately starts the story with the main conflict, the fact that Colin suddenly ends the friendship with Patrick because he is too dull for his taste and he simply has not enough time left to spend it by listening to dull talking by Patrick. It's one of McDonagh's signature moves to get the story going within the first 5 minutes. He did the same thing with In Bruges and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, skipping any introduction of the characters or world before the establishment of the story's conflict. And in this case, that's really pretty much all there is. The entire story is about the breakup of 2 lifelong friends, or is it? I have to confess, I'm slightly biased in my opinion on the movie because I'm a huge fan of Martin McDonagh. Not only have I watched all of his films at least 5 times, I also read all of his plays twice, and I'm inspired by his dark humor in my own writing as well. While his films are rather popular by now, his plays are, despite being very successful, not as well known, I assume. But in a way, The Banshees of Inisherin is pretty much the combination of both things. It's a cinematic adaptation of a play. McDonagh started his career by writing for the stage. Or to be more precise, he wrote 2 trilogies that were set in the past on a remote Irish island. These works include The Beauty Queen of Leenane, A Skull in Connemara, The Lonesome West, and the second trilogy, The Cripple of Inishmaan, The Lieutenant of Inishmore, and, you guessed it, The Banshees of Inisherin. Wait, so this movie is simply an adaptation? Not really. The last piece of his second trilogy has never been published because, as McDonough said himself, it wasn't any good. Now, even though he stated that this screenplay has nothing to do with his unpublished play except the almost identical title, I don't quite think so. Now don't get me wrong, I do not claim that he used the same story or even the same characters for this film, but I do recognize quite some similarities to his other Irish plays. The setting, obviously, the language, but also some character traits or story elements. The violent father figure in the policeman Peter, the rather dim but lovable Dominic, the curious and gossiping shop lady, the father, and also the lake as an important setting do remind me a lot of McDonagh's earlier work. So if you enjoyed The Banshees of Inisherin, you will also love his plays and maybe should go and check them out yourselves. But now back to the movie. I'm not gonna spend much more time on the summary of the plot, but in short, Colin threatens to cut off his fingers if Patrick doesn't leave him alone, and eventually does so till there are none left on his fiddling hand. Meanwhile, Patrick suffers and his niceness turns into bitterness, and he becomes just as sad and cruel as the other people on Inisherin. Over the course of the story, he loses his beloved miniature donkey Jenny, which suffocated on one of Colin's fingers, as well as his sister who moves to the mainland for a job and a better life. Patrick remains heartbroken and lonely, a feeling he refused to even think about earlier, but that he is faced with now. Colin, on the other hand, pun intended, does not do much except continuously telling Patrick to leave him alone, cutting off his fingers and composing songs. So overall it sounds like the movie doesn't tell that much of a story, right? Wrong. The Banshees of Inisherin is one of these films that get better every time you watch it. First, it might be a bit weird to watch, but once you think about it more, it shows its brilliant writing. After watching the movie, I went home and read the screenplay, and that made things a lot clearer to me. The story is not only about 2 friends breaking up, it is about war, depression, faith, and donkeys. Okay, maybe only the first 3. Mrs. McCormick, the old creepy lady, can be viewed as the Banshee of Inisherin, since her appearance with her stick and the black hood in combination with the context of her scenes do remind me very much of death. She asks about Patrick and Siobhan's dead parents, is an intimidating shade behind Patrick as he's waving goodbye to his sister, and lives by the lake where Dominic ended up in the end. Speaking of, Dominic is another strong and tragic character in the story. Known as the dimmest person on the island, most people don't take him seriously tell him to feck off or beat him, including his abusive father. But because everyone judges Dominic by his brain power, nobody sees him as what he truly is, a good man. He is a bit strange, sure, but he always listens to Patrick, is nice and in love with the only other truly good character on Inisherin, Siobhan. When she turns him down as well, he kills himself and is found dead in the lake, a stick long away from the shore. Another example of McDonagh's brilliant writing. Dominic is introduced having found a stick with a hook, wondering what use it might be of. Well, in the last scene we finally learn. Lastly, I want to briefly talk about Siobhan, one of the few female characters and probably the only sane one on the island. She's a loving and caring woman, always thinking about others first instead of herself, but still, nobody except Patrick seems to like her. She is the normal one, so to speak, which is exactly why she is the odd one on Inisherin. As she is standing by the lake, perhaps thinking of ending things, and startled by Mrs. McCormick waving to her, she decides to finally leave her home and move to the mainland. After that, we only hear from her through her letter, offering Patrick to join her, but he can't go, he can't leave this place behind. Overall, this film is a bittersweet story of cruel and nice characters, and that you don't have to stay on one side of the scale forever. The dialogue is hilarious and depressing at the same time, and the ending leaves lots of space for interpretation. One could go on about Colin and Patrick representing the parties fighting in the Civil War, since there doesn't really seem to be a good reason for the battle, but I will leave it at that, since this film can be so much at the same time, but ultimately remains one thing and one thing only, a very good movie. Just the day after I recorded this video, the Banshees of Inisherin won the Golden Globes for Best Comedy and Best Screenplay, which should not come as too big of a surprise, but still proves my point. Anyway, let me know how you liked the film in the comments down below, and if you liked this video, please leave a like or subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.